Hello, students. So today is a discussion on the histamine and antihistaminics. And in this session, we shall be covering the first part of this class. The learning objectives for this session are we are going to deal with the synthesis, storage, release of histamine. We shall have a look at the histamine receptors, the actions of histamine, and finally the pathophysiological roles of histamine. So before we go into histamine, let us see what autocoids means. The autocoids, the word is derived from the term autos, which means self, and akos means it's a healing substance. It's a Greek word and it means self-healing substances. So the term autocoid refers to substances which are produced by a wide variety of cells that have intense biological activity locally at the site of their synthesis and release. So you have to note the word locally. That means these substances are acting locally at the site of their synthesis and release. Hence, they are also called the local hormones. So all of you know that the hormones, they act at a site away from the site of their synthesis. But unlike the hormones, these autocoids, they are acting locally at the site of the synthesis. So they are involved in physiological as well as pathological process. The types of autocoids can be either amine autocoids, which includes histamine, serotonin. It can be lipid-derived autocoids, which includes prostaglandins, leukotrienes, or platelet activating factor. Then peptide autocoids, which includes plasma kinins and angiotensin. So today's class, we are going to discuss about the amine autocoid, that is histamine. So histamine, the word histamine is derived from the term histose, which means tissue, and it is an amine we already have learned in the previous slide. Now, this is a very important mediator of hypersensitivity reaction as well as inflammation reactions. Now, these are present in animal tissues as well as plants. Okay, some of the examples of plants which contain histamine are is a stinging nettle. So when you touch the some of the plants, you can get an itching sensation. This is because they can release the histamine. Now, the primary sites in the body where histamine is present are the mast cell granules in the skin, in the intestine, in the gastric mucosa, in the lungs, liver, placenta, etc. So they are primarily present in the mast cells of all these organs. The other sites where they are present in non-mast cells are in the brain, epidermis, gastric mucosa, blood, body secretions, the venoms and pathological fluids. So there is a wide variety of cells and tissues where histamine can be present. Either it can be present in the mast cells or it can be present in the non-mast cells. Now let us see the synthesis, storage and release of histamine. So histamine is synthesized from the amino acid histidine and it is a positively charged molecule. The histamine is positively charged and it is stored inside the mast cell granules along with the negatively charged acidic protein or even with the heparin. So being a positively charged molecule, it is stored inside the mast cell granules with along with a negatively charged acidic protein or heparin. Now, when does the release of histamine from the mast cells occur? It can be because of immune-mediated release or it can be non-immune-mediated release. So, whenever such a stimulus is there, either the immune stimulus or non-immune stimulus, there is a release of histamine into the blood by the process of exocytosis. So, next slide, we are going to see elaborately how the release of histamine occurs. So, first what happens is that on sensitization, now whenever a person is getting sensitized with an antigen, it will result in the production of IgE. Now, the IgE antibody, it will go and bind to the Fc epsilon receptor on the surface of mast cells. So, it is the mast cell and it is this IgE that is produced in response to the antigen is going and binding to the Fc epsilon receptor on the surface of the mast cells. Once the person gets re-challenged with the same antigen, the antigen will cause the bridging of two IgE molecules, and this bridging of two IgE molecules will result in the activation of tyrosine protein kinase. So this is resulting in the activation of tyrosine protein kinase, and this tyrosine protein kinase will activate the phospholipase C. Already you have learned about phospholipase C. The phospholipase C can hydrolyze the uh, PIP2, that is phosphatidyl inositol biphosphate, into IP3, which can in turn trigger the release of intracellular calcium. So ultimately, you are having the release of calcium. So IgE is causing the you're seeing the activation of phospholipase tyrosine protein kinase, which is resulting in the activation of phospholipase C. Finally, you have the production of IP3, which is resulting in the intracellular release of calcium. Now, these calcium ions will fuse with the granules which are containing the histamine as well as the acidic protein. And the fusion of the calcium with the granular membrane will cause the exocytotic release of histamine along with the negatively charged molecules which are stored in the granules. So this is the way the histamine is now released into the blood as a response to immune mediators. Even non-immune mediators like some drugs like opioids, D-tubercularine, vancomycin, all these can also result in the release of histamine. So when we were studying the skeletal muscle relaxant, we saw that D-tubercularine can cause a histamine release. Now this is the same thing that is happening here. It's a non-immune releaser of histamine. Now, this is just the same explanation that I have told you in the previous slide. The same thing I have put up in the slide format. Now, what happens to the histamine which is released? Now, the histamine which is released acts on the histamine receptors to produce the action. Now, the histamine receptors are of four types: H1, H2, H3, and H4. And all of these are G protein coupled receptors. Now, we are going to see each one, the actions of each one, the location of each one, as well as we are going to see the selective agonist and selective antagonist on each of the receptor subtypes. Now, of the H1, H2, H3, and H4, you have to be very much aware about the two receptors, that is H1 receptors and also H2 receptors. So first we are dealing with the H1 receptor. The drug which is, or a compound which is selectively agonist on H1 receptor is methylhistamine. A compound which is selectively antagonizing this receptor is meperamine, even chlorpheniramine. They are selective antagonists on the H1 receptor. Now, where is this H1 receptor present? So you can see they are present on the smooth muscles. Smooth muscles can be in the bronchus, in the uterus, and intestine, even blood vessels. They are present on the smooth muscle. They are present on the blood vessels, both in the endothelium of the blood vessel as well as the vascular smooth muscle. They are present on the afferent nerves, in the ganglion cells, adrenal medulla, and the brain. So, smooth muscles, blood vessel endothelium and smooth muscle of the blood vessel, on the afferent nerves, ganglion cells, adrenal medulla, and brain. These are the locations where the H1 receptor is present. Now, what is the action at each of these sites? So, H1 receptor, whenever it is stimulated on the smooth muscle, it will cause contraction. So, it can cause bronchoconstriction if the H1 receptor on the bronchial smooth muscle is contracted. Similarly, it will cause intestinal contraction, uterine contraction if the H1 receptors on the intestine or the uterus is stimulated. Now, on the blood vessels, they have got a different action. Here you have to be very careful. You can see that they are present on the endothelium. Now the endothelial H1 receptor, when they are stimulated, they can cause a release of nitric oxide and PgI2. Now both the nitric oxide and PgI2 will result in the vasodilatation. So you already know that the small blood vessels, they are having the endothelium, and the smooth muscle component in their wall is very less. So the main action on the small vessels is because of the stimulation of the H1 receptors on the endothelium, and this will result in vasodilatation. So the large vessels, large blood vessels, they have got a good amount of vascular smooth muscle, and when it is stimulated, then there is contraction of the smooth muscle and vasoconstriction. They can also cause an increased capillary permeability. So you have to understand the action on the of the H1 receptors on the blood vessel. On the capillary, they cause increased capillary permeability. On the small blood vessels, they cause vasodilatation because of the stimulation of H1 on the endothelium. On the large blood vessels, they cause vasoconstriction because of the contraction of the vascular smooth muscle. So the on the efferent nerves, they can stimulate the efferent nerves. The H1 receptor will stimulate them. The ganglion cells are also stimulated. Adrenal medulla, the stimulation of H1 receptors can release the catecholamines like noradrenaline. And the brain, it can act as a transmitter and can play a role in sedation, in the appetite and the mood and all. Now we'll see the H2 receptor. So the selective agonist is impromedin, and the selective antagonist is cimetidine and ranitidine. Now H2 receptor locations, you can see they are mainly present on the gastric glands. They are also present on the blood vessels of smooth muscles, and here you can see they are causing a vasodilatation. On the heart, they are causing a positive chronotropic and the positive inotropic effect. That is, they increase the heart rate and they increase the contractility of the heart. On the uterus, they are causing relaxation, and in the brain, they are acting as a transmitter. So you can see the H2 receptor, the principal action is on the gastric glands in the acid secretion. On the other smooth muscles, in contrast to the H1 receptor, they are actually causing a relaxation. You can see uterine relaxation, and you can see even the smooth muscles of the blood vessels are relaxed, resulting in vasodilatation. Now we will see the H3 receptor. So it is an autoreceptor, and the selective agonist is alpha methylhistamine, and the selective antagonist is thiopenamide. So it is mainly present in the brain, in the lung, spleen, gastric mucosa, ileum, cerebral vessels, and all. And everywhere it is an autoreceptor. So it is inhibiting its own release. That is, it is inhibiting the release of histamine from these areas. That is, it will release the histamine release from the brain, from the lung, spleen, gastric mucosa. It's the autoreceptor which it inhibits its own release. And in the ileum, it is inhibiting the release of acetylcholine. In the cerebral vessels, it is causing vasodilatation. Now, H4 receptor was discovered much later than the other receptor in 2001. The selective H4 agonist is 4-methylhistamine, and the sites it is present in eosinophils, mast cells, basophils, and all. And mainly, it plays a role in allergic inflammation. And this is why, so among all the receptors, mainly you have to concentrate on the H1 and H2 receptor, principally the location as well as the functions of the H1 and H2 receptor should be learned thoroughly by each one of you. Now we'll see the actions of histamine. So whatever we have learned under the receptors, if this the actions will be a summary of those actions that we have studied under the different receptors of histamine. So on the blood vessels, as I already told you, because of the action of H1, it will cause a vasodilatation of small vessels. I already told you it is because of the release of NO from the vascular endothelium, and as also the H2 will cause a vasodilatation. So H1 mediated, H1 on the small blood vessels will cause a vasodilatation. H2 on all the blood vessels will cause a vasodilatation. On the larger arteries, there is a vasoconstriction which is mediated by the H1 receptor. And there is an increased capillary permeability leading to exudation of plasma and edema, which is also mediated by the H1 receptor. So on the blood vessels, we can see H1 is causing a dilatation of the small vessels. H1 causes the vasoconstriction of the larger arteries and veins. It causes an increased capillary permeability and edema. On the other hand, H2 is acting on all the blood vessels and causing a vasodilatation. Now, what happens when histamine is administered by the different routes? That is subcutaneous, by the intravenous route, and by the intradermal routes. So, when we are administering it by the subcutaneous administration, you can see that mainly you will have a there are very cutaneous blood vessels, and it will produce flushing and heat. Not much is affected on the BP when histamine is administered subcutaneously. Not much effect on the BP will occur on subcutaneous administration. You'll just feel a sensation of flushing or heat when it is given by the subcutaneous administration. On rapid IV injection, there is a fall in the BP. Now, why it is occurring? Now, the early short-lasting BP fall is because of the stimulation of the H1 receptor. So, H1 receptor is causing a vasodilatation, and the early short-lasting BP fall is because of the H1 component. Whereas the slow persistent fall in BP is because of the H2 mediated vasodilatation. Remember the first part, that is a early short lasting BP fall, is because of H1 mediated vasodilatation of the small vessels, whereas the persistent BP fall is because of the H2 mediated vasodilatation. Now, the same thing we can apply with the low doses and the high doses of histamine. So, when the low doses of histamine are given, they will produce short-lasting BP fall because of the action of H1. Okay, and when high doses of histamine are given, then they will produce sustained BP fall because both H1 as well as H2 are stimulated. So it just indirectly means that you require a higher dose to stimulate the H2 receptors. So lower doses will stimulate only H1, and there will be a fall in the BP because of the fall in because of the vasodilatation. However, when you give a larger dose, even the H2 receptors are stimulated, and that can lead to a sustained BP fall. So whenever there is a BP fall and you because of histamine, and you want to reverse the BP fall by histamine. So, the effect of small doses of histamine can be reversed by giving a H1 antagonist. However, if you have to reverse a BP fall which is occurring because of large doses of histamine, you have to give both H1 antagonist as well as H2 antagonist, because that BP fall is occurring not only because of H1 but also because of the H2 induced vasodilatation. So, you have to antagonize both the components to bring back the BP to normal. Now, on intradermal injection, what we get is a triple response of Lewis. This is what happens usually when you get bitten by an insect, or you touch something which causes a sensation of itching and all. This is what you get, a triple response of Lewis, and it is entirely mediated by the H1 receptor. So, what is this triple response of Lewis? So first, initially, once the histamine is injected intradermally, you can see there is a red spot, and that is occurring because of capillary dilatation. I told you it causes an increase in the capillary permeability. Then you see a flare response, and that is the redness in the surrounding area because of the arteriolar dilatation. So you are having a dilatation of the arterioles in the adjoining area, which will cause redness. And the wheal is occurring because of the exudation of fluid from the capillaries and the venules. So you can see there are three components: the red spot, which is occurring because of the capillary dilatation. The flare is occurring because of the dilatation of the surrounding arterioles, and the wheal is occurring because of the exudation of the fluid from the capillaries and the venules. So so we have seen the different responses occurring when the histamine is injected subcutaneously, when it is injected intravenously, and when it is injected intradermally. Now we'll see what is the effect on the heart. So the histamine will not cause any effect on the in situ heart. That means on the heart that is functioning inside the body, it will not cause. But if you want to know the action of histamine on the isolated heart, you can use the isolated heart of the guinea pig, and you will see a positive chronotropic and inotropic effect on the heart of the guinea pig. And it is mediated through the H2 receptor. On the smooth muscle, we already learned that the main action is because of the H1 receptor, and it can cause contraction of all the smooth muscle, and H2 can cause relaxation, but however the actions of H1 is more prominent on the smooth muscle, resulting in the contraction. Then you have got the glands. Now glands, I told you it is the H2 receptors which are present in the glands, and they are involved in the secretion of the acid and the pepsin, gastric acid secretion and the pepsin secretion. Sensory nerve endings, they stimulate the sensory nerve endings and produce a sensation of itching and pain. Again, this is mediated by the H1 receptor. So you can understand by now that all these actions are just a summary of what you learned under H1 and H2 receptors. Autonomic ganglia and the adrenal medulla, they result in the stimulation of both the ganglia as well as the adrenal medulla. They cause a release of catecholamines like adrenaline, which can result in a secondary rise in BP. Now, the blood pressure of the CNS, they do not cause any effect because they cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. That is about the actions. Now we'll just have a look at the pathophysiological roles, or the areas where they are really having a prominent role. So they play a prominent role in the gastric acid secretion. So you all must be knowing that in a patient who is having peptic ulcer, the acid secretion could be very high. And one of the strategies that is adopted in a peptic ulcer patient is to give H2 blockers to block the secretion of gastric acid. And by now you know what the reason why we are giving the H2 blockers, because you know H2 is involved in the gastric acid secretion, and by giving an H2 blocker you can reduce the acid secretion in that particular patient. Now they also play a very important role in allergic phenomena. They can mediate hypersensitivity reaction. So it can manifest as urticaria, angioedema, bronchoconstriction, anaphylactic reaction, and all these things. And so the strategy for all these things will be to block the histamine release by some method. And all these allergic phenomena is mediated by the H1 receptors. Then in the brain and in the afferent nerves, it can act as a transmitter. So it can mediate the itch and the pain in sensory nerve endings. So whenever there is a itching or a pain sensation, you can always resort to an antihistamine to counteract that itch sensation. Then in the brain, it can play a role in the wakefulness, in the appetite suppression, and in the regulation of the body temperature, etc. And all because they are playing such roles, the antihistamines can be also involved in the regulation of appetite, in the regulation of sleep and all, which you will be seeing in the subsequent sessions of this topic. And they play a important role in inflammation, because all of you know that inflammation is characterized by redness, heat, dilatation, edema, and all these things. And histamine is an important mediator in inflammation. So you can see histamine is an important mediator in gastric acid secretion, allergic phenomena, inflammation, and it also plays a role in the maintaining wakefulness, appetite, body temperature, as well as thirst. Now, do we have any clinical use of histamine? So there is no therapeutic use of histamine. It was only having a experimental role. This one drug, however, called as beta histine, and this is actually an H1 selective histamine analog. And the only use of this drug is to control vertigo in Meniere's disease, and it's supposed to be causing vasodilatation in the inner ear, and is given by the oral route, and the usual doses are either 4 milligram to 8 milligram 4 times a day. So the only use that is there for this drug is in case of vertigo associated with the Meniere's disease. So we shall be continuing about the antihistaminics in the next session. So before that, you have to go through the receptors and become familiar with the normal actions of histamine. And then it will become very easy for you to understand the actions and the uses of the antihistamines, which will be taken up in the next session. Thank you.